I'm Samantha Blake, and at 28, I had everything I thought I wanted. My own apartment in New York, a career I built from scratch, and finally, peace. Or so I believed. Then, out of nowhere, my sister, Natalie, asked me to be her maid of honor. After 10 years of silence, no apology, no explanation, just a spreadsheet and a dress code. I said yes, not for her, but for me. I needed closure, but 2 days before the wedding, I woke up to find my hair, my identity, savagely chopped off in my sleep. My mother looked me in the eye and said, "It's just hair. Don't make this about you." That was the moment I stopped shrinking, and the moment I knew I was never the problem. I was just inconvenient. Before I share what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been told to stay quiet just to keep the peace, hit like and subscribe. This story is for you. You'd think being the quiet daughter, the easy one, would earn you peace. But in our house, it only made you invisible. I was 8 when I first realized my sister Natalie had a gravitational pull. People naturally orbited her. Teachers, cousins, strangers in grocery stores. Such a star, they'd say. She's going places. And I, Samantha Blake, would smile politely from the corner, clutching my sketchbook like it was body armor. Growing up in Belle Harbor, a lake town tucked away in Minnesota, everything looked picture perfect from the outside. My mother, Cynthia, was the principal at the local high school, with pearl earrings, a no-nonsense tone, and a knack for inserting herself into every PTA decision. My dad, Greg, ran Blake's Auto and Tire, the kind of man who could fix your alternator and charm your grandmother in one breath. Our house sat 3 blocks from the water, always smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. Then there was Natalie. 3 years older, she was the glitter in every room. From kindergarten spelling bees to high school musicals, Natalie took center stage. And I painted her set pieces. I designed the flyers. I blended into the background and convinced myself that's where I belonged. We weren't always at odds. There were golden moments, too. Summer afternoons building forts in the backyard, whispering dreams into flashlights. We made glitter glue greeting cards for pretend weddings and choreographed dances to Destiny's Child in our shared bedroom. Those were the days when being her little sister felt like a privilege, not a comparison. But life isn't a scrapbook. You can't glue those moments down and expect them not to wrinkle. The shift was subtle at first. I got into the University of Wisconsin on an art scholarship, full ride. Natalie was midway through her sophomore year at a private college in Chicago, studying event management. By spring, she had dropped out and moved back home, citing overwhelm and bad timing, with a tone that didn't invite questions. She never explained further. She didn't have to. Natalie didn't owe the world an explanation. I did. When I hugged my parents goodbye that August, suitcase in hand, Mom said, "Be sure to call, but don't make your sister feel bad." Greg patted my shoulder like a mechanic inspecting a dent he couldn't quite fix. I left for good at 18 and didn't come back. That's not poetic exaggeration. I mean it. 10 years. No Thanksgiving visits. No Christmas Eve candlelight services at St. Mary's. No summers on the dock with iced tea and family gossip. I built a life in New York that felt like mine. I shared a walk-up apartment in Queens with too many stairs and not enough outlets. I drank too much coffee, wore black year-round, and worked my way from junior designer to senior brand strategist at a boutique visual media firm. I even adopted a rescue cat named Salem who hated everyone but me. It was messy, imperfect, but it was mine. Natalie, meanwhile, stayed in Belle Harbor. She rebranded herself as a wedding planner, Natalie Grace Events. The Instagram bio read, followed by a pink bow emoji. Her photos were glossy, curated, and sponsored by local bridal shops. She worked the town like a stage, always bathed in soft lighting, always smiling just enough. Occasionally, I'd hear about her through old classmates. Still living at home but making it work, someone told me once at a trade conference. Kind of always talking about you, though. I smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. But here's the thing people don't realize. Distance doesn't erase dynamics. It just stretches them until they snap. The last memory I had of all 4 of us together was my high school graduation. Natalie wore white linen and oversized sunglasses and told anyone who'd listen that she was taking a mental sabbatical to realign her goals. I wore a navy robe and a face that didn't quite know how to celebrate. My parents hovered near Natalie like she might shatter. I didn't know until later that Mom had cried in private when I announced I'd accepted the scholarship, because it meant leaving Natalie behind. "She needs you," Mom whispered once over the phone, sophomore year of college. "She's having a hard time adjusting." "What about me?" I asked. Silence. That's when I learned what love sounded like when it wasn't meant for you. There's a word therapists use for what happens in families like mine: triangulation. It's when one child is used to emotionally stabilize the other. When you're the safe one, the easy one, you're expected to bend. You become the buffer, the silent apology, the stand-in therapist with a permanent seat at the keep the peace table. Natalie never said, "You abandoned me." She didn't have to. Her eyes said it for her when she posted holiday photos of just the three of us, each caption a passive-aggressive eulogy for the family I no longer belonged to. Years passed. I built a career, a routine, a spine. Therapy helped, so did boundaries. I told myself that some people bloom when you water them with distance. Then one Monday morning last spring, my email pinged. The subject line: "Be my maid of honor." It was from Natalie. No explanation, no apology. Just an attachment titled "Wedding Planning Spreadsheet," read first, and a cursory line: "You've always had good taste. Hope you can help make this day perfect." My chest tightened. Not from excitement, but something else. Something bitter and familiar. You see, Natalie never reached out unless she needed something. And in her world, appearances were everything. What better way to stage a perfect reconciliation than by casting your estranged sister as maid of honor? Still, I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My therapist once said that trauma has muscle memory. It shows up even when logic doesn't. And for a moment, I felt aid again. On the sidelines, waiting to be chosen, wondering if this time I'd finally get to matter. I clicked reply, my fingers hovered, and then I typed, "Yes, I'll be there," because I wasn't coming back for her. I was coming back for me. I hadn't set foot in Belle Harbor in a decade. 10 years of unopened Christmas cards, declined wedding invites, and silence that stretched like an ice sheet across Lake Ramsey every winter. But one email cracked it wide open. So I booked the flight. Not because I missed the place, not because I believed Natalie had changed, but because I needed to see for myself what had become of the family I left behind. And maybe, if I was lucky, leave on my own terms this time. When the plane touched down in Minneapolis, I felt the cold before the jet bridge even sealed shut. The kind of cold that doesn't ask permission. It just enters you, like memory. The drive into town was familiar in a way that stung. Same rusted gas station sign near Main Street. Same boarded-up video rental. Only thing that had changed was the bakery now sold lavender lattes, because even small towns chase trends when no one's watching. My rideshare dropped me in front of my parents' colonial-style house, blue shutters still perfectly symmetrical, just like Mom liked it. I hesitated on the porch. This wasn't a homecoming, it was a re-entry, and I wasn't sure if I was guest or threat. Cynthia opened the door. She looked exactly the same. Pressed slacks, soft blouse. Lipstick too pale for her skin tone. The only thing different was the expression. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't anger, it was calculation. "Sam," she said, like testing the taste of it. "You look..." Well, a polite lie. My hair was windblown, eyes tired from the red eye, but it wasn't a compliment anyway. It was a reminder, don't bring your mess inside. "Hi, Mom." We hugged like strangers at a funeral. A tap on the shoulder, a breath held too long. Then we stepped apart like nothing happened. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and vanilla, Cynthia's comfort combo. Greg sat in his recliner, flipping channels with more interest than he showed me. When I stepped into the room, he looked up and smiled like I was a neighbor returning a borrowed rake. "Look at you," he said. "City girl now." "Still your daughter," I replied. He didn't answer, and then Natalie walked in, wearing a cream cable knit sweater, yoga pants, and that carefully casual bun that looks accidental but never is. She smiled wide, too wide, her voice syrupy sweet. "Oh my God, you're really here." We hugged, and I caught the scent of peony and something sharper, performance. "You look amazing," she said, holding my shoulders like we were reuniting on live television. It's so good to have you back. I wasn't sure you meant the invitation, I said, not bothering to match her tone. She laughed, light and practiced. Of course I did. Who else could I trust to keep things beautiful? I didn't respond. Because if I had, I would have said, trust is earned, not assigned like a party task. Later, we sat around the dinner table, the four of us. Just like old times, if the old times had been drenched in silence and someone constantly checking their phone under the table. So, Natalie said brightly, Ethan's parents are flying in from Vermont this weekend. You'll love them. His mom's super into calligraphy. You'll have things to talk about. I looked up. Is Ethan the same Ethan Rhodes who went to NYU Med? Natalie blinked. Yeah, you two know each other? I nodded slowly. We were in the same art history elective. He once helped me carry a projector down 3 flights when it broke mid-presentation. Natalie tilted her head, smile tight. Small world, huh? Apparently, I said, and took another sip of water. Later that night, as I unpacked in the guest room, my old bedroom scrubbed of personality, with beige throw pillows and fake succulents, I heard a knock. Ethan stood in the hallway. I froze for a beat. His hair was shorter, jaw a little sharper, but the eyes. Still that same quiet curiosity. He smiled, surprised. Sam Blake. Wow. Hey, Dr. Rhodes. He laughed. Please don't. I already have enough people calling me that with stress in their voices. We talked for a few minutes. About college, the weather, his job at the pediatric clinic near the lake. He asked about my work in branding. Said he still remembered a poster I designed for an NYU art show. The compliment landed softer than I expected. But then he added, You always had a presence, even when you were quiet. I didn't know what to say to that, so I nodded. When he left, I closed the door and leaned against it. The truth was beginning to drip like water through drywall. Subtle, but impossible to ignore. Natalie had asked me back. But not out of sisterhood. This wedding wasn't about building bridges. It was about optics. And from the way Ethan looked at me, from the way Cynthia watched me at dinner like a misplaced pawn, I realized something unsettling. I hadn't just been invited. I'd been cast. And the role was about to get complicated. I used to think family tension was like static on a radio, background noise you learn to ignore. But during week 2 of wedding prep, it became thunder. Sharp, rolling, inescapable. The kind that shakes your bones without warning. Natalie had turned her dining room into wedding HQ. String lights hung above a corkboard covered in sketches, swatches, and schedules. The table was buried in pastel binders and printouts, most marked with "Do Not Change," in glitter pen. She handed me one labeled Execution Team, Samantha, as if I'd been promoted from sister to unpaid intern. I flipped it open. The first page had a mission statement that read, This day is about focus, harmony, and spotlighting love. Nothing and no one should distract from that vision. This is going to be elegant, Natalie said, crossing her arms like a creative director. Not trendy, not showy, soft luxe. Think candlelight, silk runners, champagne blush. I can work with that, I said, ignoring the implied warning. I suggested some muted eucalyptus accents for the head table, drafted digital sketches for a monogram design, and even reworked the mood board with more cohesive palettes. Natalie glanced at each idea like it was a pop quiz she hadn't studied for. Then, in her usual tone of polite dismissal, she said, Cute, but not quite the vibe. Yours feels more New York, you know? That word, New York, was starting to feel like code. Not a location. A warning label. I didn't argue. I adjusted. And I reminded myself why I was there. To keep the peace. To prove, maybe foolishly, that I could exist in her world without threatening it. But the more I bent, the more Natalie seemed to press. Every meeting ended the same. Her edits, my silence. Cynthia nodding like a judge who'd already picked a winner. Then came the bridesmaid fitting. The boutique was downtown, all exposed brick and soft jazz. The kind of place with overpriced mimosas and flattering lighting. Natalie had picked out 3 styles in dusty rows, giving each of us options based on body type. I noticed that mine was the only one with no waist and sleeves that hit at the worst possible angle. Still, I took the high road and asked to try on the A-line sweetheart style the others had already chosen. When I stepped out of the dressing room, the boutique owner clapped. Oh, honey, that neckline is perfect for you. That's the dress. Tara and Elise smiled. Even the other assistant nodded approvingly. I caught my reflection and had to admit, it worked. It softened my frame, highlighted my skin tone, made me feel visible without being loud. I turned to Natalie, seeking approval. She stared at me, frozen. Her smile flattened. Her hands gripped the edge of her chair like it was the only thing anchoring her in the moment. No, she said suddenly. I can't. Everyone stopped. The boutique fell silent. I'm sorry, I asked, confused. Natalie shook her head, blinking back tears. It's just, you always draw attention. I can't have everyone looking at you in pictures. It's not about vanity. It's about the story, and you're not the main character here, Sam. I felt the room shift. Tara opened her mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it. Elise stared at the floor. The boutique owner awkwardly stepped away. I didn't choose the dress because of how I look, I said, keeping my voice low. I chose it because it fits the theme. But not the energy, Natalie snapped, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. You always say you're helping, but somehow it ends up about you. I'll change, I said, because fighting would only confirm her story. I returned to the dressing room and slipped into the original one she'd chosen for me. It was stiff, boxy, and drained every ounce of life from my reflection. When I stepped out again, Natalie's face lit up. Now that's it. That's perfect. Later, as we were leaving the boutique, Cynthia walked beside me without looking over. It's her day, she said softly. Please don't overshadow her. Again. Like it was a pattern. Like I had a history of theft no one told me I'd committed. The next day, I went downtown alone to pick up a custom welcome sign for the rehearsal dinner. On my way back, I passed an old cafe I hadn't seen since high school. One of the baristas inside used to be my best friend, Allison. We hadn't spoken in years. I hesitated, waved through the glass. She saw me and turned away. That night, after dinner, I walked past my parents' office to head upstairs. The door was cracked. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words stopped me cold. I can't let her ruin another milestone, Cynthia whispered. She's not trying to, Greg said flatly. She just exists. Exactly, she snapped. She exists, and it derails everything. It always has. I stood there, hidden in the hallway, feeling something inside me fold. A truth I hadn't wanted to admit settled in my gut like ice. It wasn't about dresses or flowers or attention. It was about space, the kind I took up just by being me. The day after the boutique incident, everything returned to normal, or at least the version of normal they had carefully constructed. Natalie posted a group photo of the bridal party on Instagram with the caption, "Can't wait to stand beside these beauties." I was cropped just enough to miss the spotlight. Greg grilled steaks for dinner like he hadn't heard a thing the night before. And Cynthia filled the silence with questions that weren't really questions. You brought a dress steamer, right? You'll make sure to be early for the rehearsal. But beneath the surface, I could feel something splintering. Their words didn't sting the same anymore. They cut deeper. That evening, I stepped outside to get air. The backyard hadn't changed. Same weather-worn patio furniture. Same string lights coiled through the railing. A faint breeze moved through the birch trees. I thought I was alone until I heard voices carrying from the side yard. I stopped mid-step when I recognized them. Ethan and Natalie. You're being paranoid, Ethan said, voice low but sharp. She's not trying to take anything from you. I froze. She shows up and suddenly everyone's looking at her, Natalie snapped. At the dress shop, the florist, even my friends. Tara told me she looks more like the bride than I do. No one said that, Ethan replied. And even if they did, so what? You don't get to control people's eyes. There was silence for a beat. Then Natalie's voice dropped. You don't understand. You've never lived in someone's shadow. She doesn't even try, and people still gravitate toward her. She always finds a way to make everything about her. She hasn't made one thing about her, Ethan said, firmer now. She's gone out of her way to shrink herself for you. You asked her to change her dress. She did. You asked her to stop suggesting ideas. She did. What more do you want from her? Disappear completely. I want one day, Natalie hissed. One day where I'm the one everyone's looking at. I backed away, careful not to be seen. My stomach churned, not from the content, but from how familiar her words sounded. They echoed what I'd heard in whispers, in sighs, in every quiet dismissal my whole life. I went inside, heart pounding, and closed the door softly behind me. An hour later, I heard a knock at my door. Ethan. "Got a second?" he asked, casual but tense. "Just need to run something by you." I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He looked tired, like someone carrying the weight of other people's stories. He leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, then let the silence stretch for a moment. "Did you know Natalie told people you made up being bullied in high school?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "She said you fabricated stuff, that you were overly dramatic, that you even claimed she bullied you." "I never said that," I replied, stunned. "I didn't even talk about high school to anyone." "I figured," he said. "You don't talk much about the past, but she's painted you as someone unstable, untrustworthy." A silence settled between us. I felt exposed, like something intimate had been shared about me behind closed doors, twisted without my consent. "I'm sorry," Ethan added. "I shouldn't be saying this, but I think you deserve to know how she talks about you when you're not in the room." I nodded once. "Thanks for the honesty." After he left, I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed, scrolling through old documents in my Google Drive. Something compelled me to look at an old backup folder from freshman year, probably just a subconscious itch for proof that I hadn't imagined things. And that's when I found it. A scan of a document labeled Dr. Paula Hennessy, Discharge Summary, my old therapist. The note was short. "Client shows signs of emotional suppression due to environment reinforcement of peacekeeping behavior. Strongly recommend physical separation from family unit for long-term well-being." It hit me like a punch to the ribs. I had no memory of saving it, but there it was. Dated June 15th, the summer before I left for college. It was addressed to my parents. There was even a confirmation that they'd received it. They knew. They had known back then that staying in that house was unhealthy for me. That my silence wasn't peace, it was survival. And they never said a word. Never encouraged the separation or helped me understand it. They let Natalie tell the story instead. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the screen like it was a mirror. A reflection of all the pieces they had quietly removed from me without asking. The truth wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. And that was what made it more brutal. I should have known something was coming. People like Natalie don't let tension sit quietly. They wait for the perfect moment, then strike with a smile. It was 2 days before the wedding. I'd been up late finalizing the name tags and table layout because the original vendor had ghosted. And Natalie said she didn't trust anyone else to get the fonts right. I didn't mind. Precision was my thing. Control was hers. The difference was, I still had boundaries, or so I thought. That night, I stayed over again at our parents' house. Cynthia insisted it would be simpler for logistics. I was too exhausted to argue. My old room had become the guest room now. Neutral walls, meaningless art, none of my personality left in it. The bed felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just outgrown pretending to be comfortable in this house. I took 1 melatonin, brushed my teeth, and collapsed. The last thing I remember was the faint glow of my phone screen as I replied to a work email. Then nothing. When I woke up, it was to a strange sensation, like air brushing against the back of my neck. My head felt lighter, wrong. I sat up fast. The sheets fell to my waist, and the world tilted. There was hair everywhere, tufts of auburn strands clinging to the pillow, the comforter, the floor. Some locks jagged, some curled at the edges, some, God, looked like they had been cut at the root. My heart pounded. I scrambled to the mirror. What stared back was unrecognizable. My waist-length hair, the one thing I'd never changed, the one part of me I had protected since I was 14, was butchered. Uneven clumps framed my face. The back had been chopped so close it exposed skin. It wasn't just sabotage. It was a symbolic execution. I stumbled out of the room, voice stuck in my throat. Downstairs, I found them sitting at the kitchen island. Cynthia sipping coffee, Greg reading the paper, Natalie scrolling her phone, her engagement ring sparkling like a threat. I stood there, trembling. "What did you do?" They didn't look surprised, not even startled. "We just needed to balance the dynamic a bit," Cynthia said, like she was explaining a seating chart. "You've always had a certain presence. This weekend isn't about you, my voice cracked. You cut my hair in my sleep. It's just hair, Natalie said, not bothering to look up. It'll grow back. Greg finally glanced up, guilt flickering in his eyes, but he said nothing. Just shifted uncomfortably, like the floor was tilting beneath him and he was trying not to fall with me. You drugged me, I whispered. You waited until I was unconscious and I choked on the words. You violated me. Don't be so dramatic, Cynthia said, standing. You've always known how to draw attention without trying. Your sister just needed space to shine, one day, one moment. She needed you to assault me, I snapped. Cynthia flinched but kept her tone flat. Stop making everything a battle. That's when it hit me. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. This wasn't a moment of desperation. It was premeditated, organized, justified in their minds because Natalie's comfort mattered more than my autonomy. I turned, walked straight back upstairs, and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking too hard to pack properly, but I stuffed what I could into my carry-on. My fingers passed over the torn strands still clinging to the bedsheets, and I felt nauseous. I didn't cry. Instead, I called Ellis. He answered on the first ring. Sam? They cut it, I said, voice flat. They cut all my hair while I was sleeping. There was a pause. Then, where are you right now? At the house. I'm coming to get you, right now. I gave him the address and hung up. 30 minutes. That's how long I had to hold myself together. Long enough to leave. For good this time. As I zipped my bag, Natalie knocked once and walked in without waiting. You're seriously overreacting, she said. It's not like we shaved your head. We just toned it down. You'll thank me when you see the wedding photos. I stared at her. You planned this. She didn't deny it. Why, I asked. What did I do that was so threatening? You existed, she snapped. You walk into a room and people look at you. You don't even try. I'm tired of being the afterthought, the one who gets compared. I just wanted one damn day. You mean you wanted to erase me? She crossed her arms. I wanted to matter. You do, I said quietly. But not like this. I pushed past her and walked out. Greg was standing in the hallway, eyes on the floor. Say something, I said, but he didn't. Because the only thing worse than the people who hurt you are the ones who stand there and let it happen. Ellis pulled up 10 minutes later. When he saw me, hair jagged, face pale, his jaw tightened. You're not staying here another second. He opened the passenger door and I climbed in. As we pulled away from the house, I watched it shrink in the mirror, clean windows, trimmed lawn, everything in perfect order, except for the truth. I didn't speak much on the drive to St. Paul. Ellis knew better than to fill silence that wasn't his to solve. He just drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently near my knee, offering presence without pressure. My fingers wouldn't stop grazing the ragged ends of my hair, as if confirming over and over that this had really happened. It wasn't just a haircut. It was a quiet erasure. A boundary crossed in the dead of night, disguised as concern. You don't wake up with half your identity on a pillow and call it a misunderstanding. By the time we reached Ellis's apartment, I could feel the grief blooming under my skin. It wasn't loud yet. It was soft, deliberate, like a bruise forming beneath the surface. He opened the door, ushered me inside, and didn't ask questions until I was ready. Can I call Zoe? I finally said. I need this fixed. I need something. Zoe was a hairstylist, friend of mine from New York, the kind who knew when to crack jokes and when to bring silence. She arrived 2 hours later, carrying her kit and wide-eyed horror. Jesus, Sam, she said, stepping closer. When you said it was bad, I didn't think. She cut herself off. They really did this to you? I nodded. While I was asleep, Zoe looked at Ellis. We're calling the police, right? No, I said flatly. I'm not ready for that fight. I just want to feel like a person again. She didn't argue, she just got to work. The bathroom became her studio. My shoulders were draped in a cape, and my past fell in soft thuds to the tile. Pixie is our only option, she murmured, combing through what was left. But we'll make it sharp, intentional, not broken. She moved with precision, like a surgeon undoing damage. And when she was done, I looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I saw cheekbones I hadn't noticed since high school. My jawline looked stronger, my eyes clearer. I didn't look like Natalie's sister anymore. I looked like me. That cut's got attitude, Ellis said behind me. Good kind, I managed a small smile. Maybe I needed a little. Zoe snapped a photo over my shoulder. Caption it something bold. Take your narrative back. An hour later, I posted it. Black and white selfie, sharp lighting, sharp eyes, even sharper edge to my jawline. The caption read, "A new chapter starts here." I didn't tag anyone. I didn't need to. The post took off on its own. Likes, DMs, heart reactions from people I hadn't heard from in months. The silence from my family was deafening. The next morning, I woke up with clarity instead of dread. I made coffee, sat on the balcony with Ellis. The sky was still soft with morning light. "You slept like a person who finally escaped a cult," he said gently. "I think I did." "What now?" "I tell the truth," I said. "Not to them, to someone who'll listen." That night, I sent an anonymous essay to a local online magazine. It was called "When Family Cuts Too Deep." I didn't name names, didn't drag anyone through the dirt. I just wrote what happened, the way it happened. I ended with one question. Where is the line between love and control, and who pays when it gets crossed? 3 days later, it was published. And it exploded. Comments poured in from readers, strangers, saying they'd been there too. That their mothers, sisters, aunts had cut their power down in the name of protection. Women wrote in about weddings, about sisters, about being told to shrink themselves. Some thanked me, some cried. One just wrote, "I thought I was alone." Zoe read it twice. Then she looked at me and said, "You just ripped the veil off an entire culture of silent betrayal." But what struck me most wasn't the internet. It was the text that started showing up from people back home, from high school friends I thought had forgotten me, from Allison, the girl who turned away in the cafe, who messaged, "Was that about Natalie?" I always suspected she was behind the rumors. I didn't respond to any of them, not yet. Instead, I focused on the tiny things. Watering Ellis's plants, going for walks, letting the air hit my neck like a badge I finally earned. The haircut grew on me, literally and emotionally. I had lost the longest part of myself, but gained something else in return: control. The text came at 6:42 a.m., 2 days after my essay went viral. Natalie wrote, "We all say things we don't mean, but I'd still like you to be there. Just show face, it's one day." No apology, no recognition, just the same sugar-laced control dressed in civility. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I'll come, but I'm not wearing a wig. And I'm not wearing a dress picked to disappear." Ellis raised an eyebrow over his coffee. "You're really going?" I need to look her in the eye, one last time. I'm not hiding anymore. The wedding was in 2 days, and I knew the dress code wasn't written for someone like me, so I rewrote it. I walked into a boutique in St. Paul with a mission in my chest, and walked out with a tailored white suit. Sharp lapel, clean lines, unapologetically crisp. It fit like armor and moved like a statement. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted to walk into that venue and not flinch. When I stepped into the church foyer on the day of the wedding, silence swallowed the room for half a breath. I could feel eyes on my hair, on the cut of my suit, on the confidence I didn't bother softening. A woman near the guest book whispered, "Is that Samantha?" And someone else said, "She looks stunning." I smiled politely and kept walking. Ethan found me near the back pew. His eyes ran over the suit, then locked on my face. "You look powerful," he said softly. I tilted my head. "Thanks, I am." There was a beat where neither of us said anything. Then he whispered, "You didn't deserve any of this." "I know." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the music changed and the bridesmaids started lining up. I took my place among them, not in a gown but standing tall in white, refusing to blend in. Natalie came down the aisle last, radiant and trembling. Her eyes landed on me, and the smile she wore cracked. For just a second. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Vows, laughter, fake tears. My presence was quiet but unmistakable. Guests kept glancing toward me, whispering in corners. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I didn't smile unless it was real. My very existence was a disruption, and for once, I let it be. The reception hit full swing around dusk. Lights twinkled across the dance floor. The DJ spun a playlist I had once suggested, and Natalie had once rejected. I sipped my champagne and watched her try to own the room, spinning between relatives and college friends with curated joy. But every time someone complimented me, her smile stiffened a little more. Then it happened. A cousin I hadn't seen in years said loudly, "Sam, you should consider modeling. That look is editorial." That was the final thread. Natalie froze mid-conversation, turned toward me with eyes like fire, and before I could blink, a bouquet of white roses hit my chest. The room went silent. "You just had to make it about you, didn't you?" she hissed. "You couldn't give me one day." I didn't react, not visibly. I simply bent down, picked up the crushed bouquet, and set it on the table like something delicate. "I didn't take your day," I said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't mine too." Cynthia rushed over. "Girls, please, let's not." But I didn't need to argue. I wasn't there to fight. I looked Natalie in the eye, voice calm. "I hope you find peace someday." Because I already did, and I walked away. Outside, Ellis was leaning against the car. He looked up at me, expression unreadable. "That bad?" "That necessary," I said, opening the door. The sky was turning orange above us, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of my last name pressing into my skin. I felt light, like I'd finally returned to the place inside me that never belonged to them. Natalie would spin it. Cynthia would minimize it. Greg would pretend he didn't see it, but that wasn't my business anymore. What I had done wasn't about reclaiming space in their world. It was about building one that didn't shrink me. I didn't win. I didn't destroy. I simply stood up. And that was enough. The fallout didn't come with sirens. It came in notifications. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to 73 unread messages and a group chat exploding with links. A regional news outlet had picked up my anonymous essay. "When family cuts too deep," it read, now reshared by a national women's publication. No names were mentioned, but everyone in our town could read between the lines. By noon my inbox was flooded. Some messages were from former classmates. I always knew something was off, one wrote. A few were distant relatives who had sat through enough birthdays and graduations to understand the undertones. And then there were the strangers, who saw their own families in my story, and called it brave and devastating in the same breath. What surprised me most wasn't the support. It was the silence from the people who used to silence me. No angry calls from Cynthia. No emails begging for clarification. No messages pretending it wasn't about them. Just radio silence. And that said everything. 3 days later, I got a text from my cousin Molly. "Just thought you should know. Natalie's wedding photos aren't being posted. Something went down after you left." My heart didn't race. It didn't even skip. It just sat there, steady, curious, not invested. Ellis read the text over my shoulder. "Think she's okay?" "She'll be fine," I said. Being confronted with your own reflection is hard, but not fatal. Later that night, I got a DM from Rachel, someone who used to be Natalie's best friend in high school. She wrote, "I know we've never been close, but I need to say this. I'm sorry for believing her. I remember when she told people you made things up. And I believed her. That's on me." It wasn't validation I needed, but it felt like closure I didn't expect. The wedding guests had started to talk, apparently. Word spread that Natalie threw a bouquet at me in front of 80 witnesses. Some found it funny, some called it tragic. Others, mostly women my age, understood it for what it was, a scream from someone who lost control of the narrative. You can dress resentment in lace and pearls, but eventually it rips at the seams. I heard through another friend that Ethan had moved out, packed a suitcase, and drove back to his parents' house 2 towns over. He just needed air, they said. It was too much. I didn't follow up. I didn't want to know if he left for a weekend or for good. It wasn't my story to carry anymore. Cynthia, true to form, made no public statements. But someone screenshotted her comment under a Facebook thread discussing the essay. All she wrote was, "People should be careful what they write. It affects real families." No names, no denial. Just enough venom to stain without spilling. I stared at the comment for a while. Then I closed the app and went for a run. Healing isn't linear, they say. But that week, it felt like a line I was finally drawing, with ink, not pencil. People started calling me resilient, strong, fearless. But those aren't the words I'd use. I wasn't fearless. I was exhausted. I wasn't strong. I was fed up. And I wasn't resilient. I was finally done negotiating my worth. The night before I left St. Paul for a work project in Chicago, I sat with Ellis on our small balcony, watching the city lights blink like quiet applause. He poured me a glass of wine. "Do you think she'll ever reach out again?" he asked. "She might," I said, "but I'm not holding space for it. I don't know if Natalie cried after the wedding. I don't know if Cynthia had to explain anything to the relatives. I don't know what Greg said, if he said anything at all. But I know this. The silence I used to dread had become my peace. And peace, I learned, isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of guilt for choosing yourself." The envelope came on a Wednesday. Cream cardstock, handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Natalie's loops were careful, like she was trying to prove something with each curve. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the entry table, untouched, for 3 days. It watched me come and go, silent but heavy, like a dog that had seen too much. When I finally slid it open, I read the first sentence 3 times. "You always got everything without trying. I just wanted one day to feel important." There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a ledger of perceived slights, homecoming, graduation, even Dad's attention when I fixed his old Mustang. Moments I barely remembered, but apparently she'd archived in pain. I finished the letter in under a minute, then folded it again like closing a door. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't even sigh. That was the real shift. The absence of heat where there used to be fire. For the first time, I wasn't writing back in my head. I wasn't explaining or defending. I just let the silence answer for me. But that night, I sat down at my desk, turned on the lamp, and wrote something else. I didn't write it for Natalie. I wrote it for myself. "Dear sister," I began. "You could have had everything. You had my trust, my admiration, and every chance to be more than my shadow. But you chose control. You chose manipulation over connection. And now you want comfort without accountability." My pen moved steadily, not fast, not furious, just certain. You wanted to be the center, and you were, but not because you were graceful, because you were loud, and people learned to orbit you, not because they adored you, but because they feared being next. I ended it with no love, no regards, just my name. I never mailed it. I folded it carefully and slid it into the drawer where I keep things I've outgrown but can't quite throw away. A week later, Cynthia called. I didn't answer. Instead, I got a formal email. The subject line read, "Request, joint session." She wanted a mediated conversation with a therapist. I stared at the screen, remembering the therapist's note I found weeks ago, the one she hid from me for a decade. I replied, "Only if we discuss the records, unedited, aloud." She agreed. The session was held in a neutral office downtown. Cream walls, soft lighting, tissues on every side table, standard grief decor. Cynthia walked in wearing her school principal face, the one she used when parents questioned a disciplinary note. Her jaw was tight, hands clasped in front of her lap like she'd rehearsed contrition in a mirror. The therapist asked if we wanted to begin with anything specific. I didn't wait. I took the old file from my bag, placed it on the coffee table, and slid it toward them. "This," I said, "is what I wasn't supposed to find." Cynthia blinked. "I thought it was filed away." "It was, under your bed." The therapist looked down, scanning the typed note from 10 years ago. Client recommended prolonged distance from familial environment due to emotional volatility and triangulation patterns within household. Cynthia's voice cracked. "I didn't want that to define you." "No," I said. "You didn't want anyone else to define what you couldn't control." For a moment, the room was still. Then something broke, something not loud, but real. Her shoulders sagged. Her breath shuddered. And then finally, tears. Not performative ones. Not guilt-managing ones, but real, unedited. "I didn't know how to protect both of you," she said, through her hands. "So I picked the daughter who stayed." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. The therapist looked at me, as if asking what I needed in that moment. I answered without looking up. "I need distance." I need the right to step back without being cast as selfish. I need space without guilt being mailed to my door. No one interrupted. Cynthia just nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. That night, I didn't replay the conversation in bed. I didn't wonder what Natalie thought. I didn't wait for another letter. I lit a candle, opened the window, and let the cool air tell me I did the right thing. And that drawer where I kept my unsent letter? I didn't burn it. I didn't shred it. I just moved it to a new folder, labeled Things That Taught Me Who I Am. The last time I heard Natalie's voice was through that letter. The words had weight, but not the kind that lingered. They didn't haunt me. They didn't curl around my ribs like they used to. I placed the envelope in a drawer beside others I never mailed and closed it like sealing a chapter. I wasn't angry, just finished. Cynthia and I kept our distance, but we kept our word. If we spoke, it was through the therapist. No sudden calls, no guilt trips disguised as questions. We created boundaries, concrete, negotiated ones, and surprisingly, she respected them. Maybe because for the first time, I didn't blink when I drew the line. Life in St. Paul settled into a rhythm I didn't realize I'd craved. Ellis and I rented a light-filled loft with exposed brick and mismatched chairs. The kind of place that didn't scream perfect, just whispered, free. We painted the walls ourselves, badly. Laughed so hard we left one corner half done. And I let myself enjoy it without wondering if I was being selfish. I launched my own design studio 2 months later. Just a name on the window at first. Presence visual. No frills. No mission statement carved in neon. Just my work, my pace, my voice. Clients came in slowly, then steadily. And when one of them called my aesthetic honest, I went to the bathroom and cried silently against the sink. I kept my hair short. Even as it began to grow back. Even when friends said I'd look amazing with waves again, I kept it cropped, clean, defined. Not because I feared letting it grow, but because it reminded me that identity isn't about what's taken from you. It's what you choose to reclaim. Ellis and I didn't talk much about what happened. He never tried to fix it, never gave me long speeches about forgiveness. He just stayed, brought me coffee when I worked late, danced with me in the kitchen when I got a new client, kissed the top of my head when I sat too long at the window. That was enough. One afternoon, I opened a package from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Inside was a photograph, me and Natalie, age 6 and 9, wearing matching overalls and holding a sign that read, Our Backyard Theater Presents, Sisters Forever. A shaky heart drawn in marker at the bottom. There was a sticky note on the back. I thought you should have this. I always knew you were the brave one. I didn't cry, but I sat on the floor for 20 minutes, staring at that photo like it might tell me something new. It didn't, but it reminded me I'd always had a voice. I just stopped using it when it got too quiet in that house. Weeks passed, then months. The holidays came. I didn't go back home. I sent a card, no message, just my name. Cynthia sent one in return. It simply said, Thank you for protecting yourself. That's what I should have done too. It wasn't enough to rebuild, but it was enough to breathe. On New Year's Eve, Ellis and I stood on our rooftop, watching fireworks scatter over the river. He asked me what my word for the next year would be. Not a resolution, just a word. I thought for a long time. Grace, I said. Not silence, not peace, but grace. The kind that doesn't demand a performance. The kind that lets you leave a room without slamming the door. The kind that lets you build something new, even if you're still learning how to live inside it. I never went back to that town, but sometimes I pass by it on the highway, and I don't flinch anymore. I don't rehearse what I'd say if I saw Natalie at a grocery store. I don't wonder if she ever understood. That's not my job. I don't owe anyone my presence. Not anymore. And every time I glance in the mirror, I see her. The version of me that didn't shrink, didn't beg, didn't wear the wig just to keep the peace. I see her in the sharp lines of my jaw, in the quiet defiance of my short hair, in the stillness behind my eyes. No more apologies, no more shrinking to fit someone else's frame. And if I ever forget, if I ever start to round my edges again, I have one sentence written on the post-it above my desk. 7 words that carried me out of that house, out of that pattern, out of that silence. It wasn't the haircut that changed my life. It was the moment I stopped apologizing for existing.